The television murmured softly in the background, the way it always did during my evening hour of peace. I sat curled into my moss-green armchair, the one I bought with the first survivor's check after my husband passed away more than a decade ago. The scent of peach cobbler drifted from the kitchen, and the coffee on the side table sent up gentle curls of steam. It was my hour of stillness, the time when my joints loosened, my thoughts quieted, and the house finally felt like a home instead of a station where everyone rushed through me. Then the front door slammed with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. I didn't have to look. I recognized the sound of Derek's entrance, the kind of arrival that demanded recognition without offering any. My daughter, Mara, followed him, weighed down by grocery bags and an even heavier silence. Her shoulders curled inward the way they often did, as if she were trying to fold herself small enough to escape impact. I kept my eyes on the TV screen. Derek's steps thudded across the living room, pausing directly in front of me. Without a word, he reached for the remote, leaned into my line of sight, and pressed the button. The TV blinked into darkness. "Off to your room, old lady," he snapped. "I'm watching the game here." His voice scratched through the quiet, leaving a long, jagged tear in it. Mara winced but said nothing, shifting the bags in her hands as though rearranging items might rearrange the situation. I waited for her eyes to meet mine. She didn't look up. My palms rested on the armrests. I rose slowly, my knees clicking like old drawer hinges. Derek had already collapsed onto the couch, claiming the space with the entitlement of someone who had confused generosity for ownership. My daughter busied herself in the kitchen, the noise of dishes becoming a stand-in for the words she refused to speak. I walked to my bedroom, not to hide, not to surrender, but to retrieve something I hadn't touched in years. From the bottom drawer of my dresser, beneath folded scarves and certificates no one had asked about in decades, I pulled a weathered leather pouch. Inside it, a banded folder held documents that still smelled faintly of ink and formality. The deed to the house, the bill of sale, all with my name, my full legal name, printed in precise, unambiguous letters. People forget that paper is patient. Paper waits. Paper does not raise its voice. It simply wins. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Gray hair neatly combed back, glasses on a chain, a soft blouse and linen trousers. I looked every bit the grandmother who baked pies and knitted scarves. How convenient for them. Wolves stay well fed when the shepherd pretends not to see their teeth. But I saw them now, clearly. I gathered my keys, straightened my posture, and stepped back into the living room. Derek didn't look at me. He assumed I was shuffling to my room like an obedient guest in my own home. Instead, I walked to the front door, turned the deadbolt, and stepped out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't owe them noise. The air outside was crisp, cold enough to sharpen the edges of my thoughts. I hailed a cab before the gate even finished swinging shut behind me. And as I slid into the back seat, I felt it, my first breath of ownership in years. But that breath was only the beginning. The storm I was about to unleash would require far more than quiet exits and crisp evening air. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I share new life stories every day, and your support truly keeps this channel alive. Now, back to the story. The cab glided through evening traffic, its interior humming softly, almost soothingly. Streetlights reflected off the windows, passing in rhythmic gold flashes that felt like punctuation marks to the thoughts lining up inside my head. I wasn't running away. I was stepping into something overdue. "Where to?" the driver asked, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "The Grand Regent Hotel downtown," I replied, my voice steady, firm enough to surprise even me. When the driver nodded and turned the car toward the city, I finally allowed myself a slow exhale. For years, I had bent myself into shapes that fit everyone else's comfort. Tonight, I stood up straight, even sitting down. With shaking but determined fingers, I scrolled through my contacts. Most names barely meant anything anymore, relics of gatherings and small talk. But one name still carried weight, both in ink and in memory. Attorney Samuel Breyer, property law, as precise as a ruler and twice as unyielding. He answered on the second ring. "Celeste, it's late. What's wrong?" "I've come to my senses, and I need legal assistance first thing tomorrow." The rustle of papers sounded on his end. "Tell me." "I need to remove 2 occupants from my home. They've lived there for years. No lease, no rent, no respect." A pause. Then in that familiar clipped tone, "Do you have the deed?" "Yes." "Then you have the power. Come by at 8. I'll prepare the documents tonight." "Thank you, Samuel." For you, justice is long overdue. By the time the taxi pulled up to the hotel's grand awning, I felt lighter. The doorman opened my door with more courtesy than my own son-in-law had shown me in a decade. "Good evening, ma'am. Any luggage?" "Just this," I said, holding up my purse, "and a decision." The suite smelled faintly of lavender and polished wood. I slipped off my shoes, turned on the television, set the volume to whatever level I pleased, and ordered a warm bowl of soup with a glass of wine. Simple comforts, but for the first time in a long time, I enjoyed them without guilt or interruption. As I ate, I pictured the scene at home. Derek lounging in the living room, believing himself untouchable. Mara hovering nearby, trying to keep peace while drowning in silence. Neither of them expecting consequence. Human nature is predictable that way. People assume the well won't dry up if you never let them see the cracks. But my well wasn't cracked, it was dammed, and tomorrow morning I would open the floodgates. Before bed, I set my documents neatly on the desk and turned off the lamp. The city hummed outside the window, but inside the room, quiet lived easily. For the first time in years, I slept without bracing myself for someone else's footsteps. But while I slept peacefully, the chaos I had set in motion was already stirring back home, and by morning, every silence I had ever swallowed would return to them tenfold. Morning sunlight cut through the hotel curtains like a quiet promise. I woke without the heaviness that usually clung to my chest, as though someone had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. A shower, a neat blouse, the same trousers from yesterday, but somehow they fit a different woman now. By 7:45, I was in a cab heading toward Attorney Greyer's office. The city moved around me with its usual rhythm, horns and rushing footsteps, but inside the car, everything felt oddly still. My hands were steady, my heartbeat calm. It was remarkable how quickly peace returned when chaos was no longer invited into your home. Samuel greeted me at the door himself, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, as though he'd been up all night preparing. Knowing him, he probably had. "Celeste," he said, offering a seat, "everything's ready." He slid a stack of documents across the desk, each page crisp with authority. The notice to vacate, the termination of gratuitous use, an optional demand for back rent, which I didn't request out of pettiness but principle. People treat generosity like a bottomless well until you make them aware of the bucket. 30 days is standard, Samuel explained. After that, we proceed legally, but for now, all they need to do is read. "Reading has never been Derek's strong suit," I murmured. Samuel smirked. "Luckily, paper doesn't argue." On cue, the door opened and a young paralegal stepped in. Jordan, neat haircut, impeccably pressed suit, eyes sharp behind thin glasses. "This is the one who will deliver the notice personally," Samuel said. "He doesn't raise his voice, doesn't negotiate, just hands over the envelope and leaves." Perfect. I signed every page carefully, each signature a boundary drawn in ink. When the final stroke dried, Samuel nodded at Jordan. "Head out now, serve the notice, call me when it's done." Jordan left with professional silence, closing the door behind him, and then there was nothing to do but wait. So I waited. I took a seat in the reception area with a paper cup of machine coffee that smelled vaguely caramel. A clock on the wall ticked steadily, but I wasn't thinking of time. I was thinking of the years I had spent shrinking, adjusting myself to make others comfortable, running between rooms to avoid conflict, whispering through my own home so Derek's moods stayed undisturbed. It was all so clear now. My purse vibrated on my lap. Mara's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mama!" she cried. Her voice cracked into panic. "There's a man here. He gave us papers. Derek is yelling. What is happening? Where are you?" I held the phone away from my ear, Derek's shouting boiling in the background like a pot left too long on the stove. "Calm down," I said. "Read the notice." "Mama, it says eviction, 30 days. You can't be serious." For the first time in years, I am absolutely serious. I ended the call, letting the red button return my peace. Samuel stepped into the doorway, eyebrows raised. "Daughter?" I nodded. "The performance has begun." He smiled faintly. "Then Act 2 will be even better." And he was right, because the moment that notice landed in their hands, the balance of power finally shifted. But I had no idea how quickly that shift would push Derek into desperation and just how far he'd go once he realized the king of the living room no longer ruled anything at all. The hours after the notice was served unfolded like a quiet symphony of unraveling control. My phone buzzed twice more, once with a text from Mara, then one from Derek, but I ignored both. Peace sometimes requires selective hearing. I sat in the reception area of Samuel's office, legs crossed, purse neatly beside me. The ticking clock on the wall wasn't ominous. It felt like a metronome marking the rhythm of a life finally finding its tempo again. I breathed easily, sipping my too-sweet coffee. The bitter edge of reality had long overshadowed caffeine, so I welcomed anything warm. Another buzz, another message, this time from Derek. "Come home now. We need to talk." I deleted it without reading the rest. A bully's voice loses its power the moment you stop offering it an audience. Samuel reappeared from his office, holding his own cup of coffee. "You doing all right out here?" "I'm completely fine," I replied. And I meant it. He nodded, glancing at the silent phone on the table beside me. "Don't let him pull you in emotionally. Men like him thrive on drama. When the drama is removed, they flail." "I know," I said. "It's how he's operated for years." While we spoke, I couldn't help drifting back to all the small humiliations I'd lived with under my own roof. How I'd eaten the burnt edges of pie so Derek could have the center. How I lowered my TV volume to keep him focused during his imaginary business meetings. How my home had become a sanctuary for everyone but me. But today I was done cultivating other people's comfort at the expense of my dignity. A new message buzzed through, this one from the bank. "Transaction declined. $85. Butcher shop." I smiled. Of course Derek had tried to buy himself a prime rib in the middle of a household crisis. Problems rolled off him like water off wax. Until now. I opened my notebook and wrote the next steps clearly. 1. Legal. Notice delivered. Deadline set. 2. Financial. Utilities suspended, cards frozen, no unnecessary access. 3. Silence. Respond only with facts, never with emotion. Samuel, I said, I need to shut off every service that's in my name. He raised an eyebrow. Internet, cable, all of it, I said. If they want luxuries, they can pay for them. He chuckled. You're calm, which makes you lethal. It's not anger, I replied. It's clarity. I stepped outside to make the calls. One by one, the providers confirmed. Service suspended, effective immediately. No drama, just logistics. I walked back inside feeling something I hadn't in years. Untethered. Another message came in, this time from Derek again. Answer me, this isn't over. Oh, but it was, just not in the way he expected. By late afternoon, the world outside Samuel's office had settled into a quiet buzz. People moved with purpose, cars drifted by, life went on exactly as it should. I stood, straightened my blouse, and took a long breath. I wasn't going home, not yet. The hotel awaited, and so did a slow meal eaten without flinching at someone else's temper. But before the day was over, one unexpected phone call would attempt to drag me right back into their chaos and test just how firm my new boundaries really were. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I share new life stories every single day, and your support helps me bring more of them to you. Now, let's step back into the story. The lobby of the hotel was warm and softly lit when I returned, my new clothes rustling faintly as I crossed the polished floor. It was the first time in years I'd walked into a place without explaining myself to anyone. Freedom doesn't always arrive with grand fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with a quiet hum of air conditioning and a receptionist greeting you by name. Back in my room, I slipped off my shoes and let my shoulders relax. The room felt calm in a way my own home hadn't felt in a long time. I ordered a simple dinner, risotto, fresh bread, a glass of white wine, and sat by the window, watching city lights tremble on the glass like shy confessions. For once, a meal tasted exactly the way it should, peaceful. But peace rarely survives untouched. The landline rang. Hotel reception, a polite voice. Ma'am, your daughter is in the lobby asking to come up. Shall we send her, or would you prefer to meet downstairs? I inhaled deeply, not in dread, just preparation. Tell her I'll meet her in the lobby. I smoothed my blazer, adjusted the chain of my glasses, and rode the elevator down. The doors opened to reveal Mara pacing in small, frantic circles. Her blouse was wrinkled, her hair askew, as though she'd rushed out without looking in the mirror. "Mama!" she exclaimed, rushing toward me, then stopping short when she saw my expression, the straightness of my posture, the quiet in my eyes. "Sit," I said, pointing to a nearby armchair. "We will speak calmly." She sat, folded tightly upon herself. "Please, Mama, everything's falling apart. The internet is down, the TV is off, the card isn't working at the store. People were staring at us. Derek is furious. He says this is humiliation." "Humiliation," I said evenly, "is being shouted at in your own home. This is consequence." Her eyes glimmered with desperation. "He had a bad day yesterday, Mama. You know how he gets. But he says he's sorry. Please, just turn everything back on. Let's go home. We can talk this out." "No," I said, calm, firm, a word I had forgotten I could use without apology. Her lip trembled. "He says you're tearing the family apart." I stared at her. If the family collapses because I stopped funding it, then it wasn't a family. It was a dependency. She looked down at her hands. "He needs the internet for work. Then he can pay for it. If he wants to call himself the man of the house, he can start by handling a monthly bill." Her breath hitched, then softer. "He said if he can't have your house, he doesn't want to be with you." The truth landed hard between us. I leaned forward. "If your marriage only survives by draining me, then it is not a marriage. It is captivity." She swallowed hard. A tear slipped down her cheek, not dramatic, not loud, just honest. "Mama," she whispered, "I don't know what to do." "You will," I said, "but not tonight." She sat still for a long moment before nodding, barely. Then she stood and walked toward the exit, her steps small and shaken, but her spine a little straighter than before. But even as she left the lobby, Derek was already planning his next move, and the lengths he'd go to protect his imagined power would shock even me. The night settled quietly after Mara left, but I knew silence in this situation was never an ending, only an interval before the next attempt to pull me back into chaos. Still, I went upstairs, removed my blazer, and sat on the bed with the calm certainty of someone who'd stepped over an invisible threshold. Once you cross it, you don't return to the old version of yourself. I checked my email before sleeping, something I rarely did at night. A message from Samuel popped up almost instantly. Notice delivered. They reacted poorly. Derek contacted his company's legal team. His manager was copied. Reprimand likely. Meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Prepare yourself. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the weight of those words settle. Derek had always relied on volume and intimidation to win arguments, but paper, emails, and corporate chains of command don't respond to yelling. They respond to actions, his actions, and now they were answering him. I turned off the lamp and slept deeply, unbothered by the buzzing of my phone. If something was burning, let it burn. It wasn't my fire anymore. Morning came with soft light slipping through the curtains. I stretched, feeling strangely energized. A hot shower, a simple breakfast in the hotel cafe, oatmeal, fruit, and coffee, and I caught a cab to the law office. The receptionist greeted me warmly. "He's expecting you." Samuel ushered me in with his usual calm, placing a neat stack of papers in front of me. "These," he said, "are your shields for today. Not weapons, shields, enough to protect my peace." I appreciated the distinction. We reviewed everything, the deed, the notice, the timeline, the consequences, clear, factual, unshakable. I wasn't going into battle, I was attending a meeting, but clarity is its own armor. "Remember," Samuel said, "stay calm. Derek will try to provoke you. People who lose power often thrash. Let 'em thrash. We'll stay on the shore." I nodded. "I'm ready." At 9:58, the door to the conference room clicked. I felt my spine straighten instinctively. Through the frosted glass, I could see the blurry outlines of two figures, one tall and tense, the other slouched with worry. Then the door opened. Derek entered first, not with swagger, but with frantic energy barely concealed beneath a button shirt that hadn't been ironed. His tie was crooked, his hair unkempt, his eyes darted around the room as though looking for something to grab hold of. Behind him, Mara followed quietly, her purse clutched to her chest, eyes lowered. She looked like she hadn't slept. The moment they stepped inside, power shifted. They felt it. I could see it in the stiffness of Derek's shoulders. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We're here under protest." "Good," Samuel replied smoothly. "Let's begin." Mara looked up at me briefly, almost pleading, but I held her gaze steady, not cold, just unmistakably firm. This wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. It was the first real order any of us had seen in years. The meeting hadn't even started, and the room already felt like a turning point. But what Derek said next, grasping at laws he didn't understand and lies he thought could still protect him, would unravel his entire facade faster than even I expected. Derek didn't sit right away. He hovered behind the chair across from me, fingers drumming sharply on the backrest, as if trying to remind everyone he still possessed authority. But authority isn't noise, not when documents and deadlines are already in motion. "Before we begin," he said loudly, "I want it on record that we've lived in that house for 4 years. 4 years. We have rights. Ever heard of adverse possession?" Samuel didn't even blink. "Yes," he said calmly, "more often than you think, and this situation meets none of the criteria." Derek scoffed. "We've openly occupied the property. Everyone knows it's our place. That counts." I folded my hands neatly on the table. "Adverse possession," I said, matching Samuel's calm, "requires that the true owner hasn't paid for or maintained the property. I live there. I've paid every bill. I object. You're not owners. You're guests who overstayed." His mouth twitched, caught between anger and the fear of realizing he'd brought a knife to a paperwork fight. Mara shifted uncomfortably, glancing at him as if expecting him to soften. But Derek never softened. He only sharpened. He slammed a hand onto the table. "She's cutting off our utilities. That's emotional distress. Illegal, actually." "Incorrect," Samuel replied, sliding a paper toward him. "Internet, cable, and supplementary credit cards are not essential utilities. She is under no obligation to maintain them for you." Derek looked at Mara, then back at the document as if words might magically rearrange themselves into something that favored him. "She's destroying our family," he said, pointing at me like a prosecutor in a cheap courtroom drama. "And for what? Because I turned the TV off? That's what this is about? A remote control?" I finally leaned back in my chair, letting silence deepen before I answered. "It's about years, Derek, years of disrespect, years of treating my home like your kingdom, years of sending me to my room like a misbehaving child. A single match doesn't burn a house down, but it does ignite the pile of wood you stacked." Mara lowered her head. Derek clenched his jaw. Samuel continued. "The notice is valid. The deadline is fixed. After 30 days, if you do not vacate, legal proceedings will begin, including recovery of fair market rent for the period after the notice." The color drained from Derek's face. "You can't charge us rent. We're family." "Family is chosen by behavior, not by marriage certificates." His breathing grew harsher, louder, as if volume could alter reality. Then he made one last attempt. "We saved money," he said desperately, glancing at Mara. "I've been investing, growing our future. We were going to move out soon, right, Mara?" She hesitated. She knew something she had avoided looking at in full light. So I set the folder gently on the table and slid it toward her. "Then you should read the statements, all of them." Mara reached for the papers, her hands trembling. What she saw inside would break the last illusion she had about her husband and about the life he had pretended to build for them. Because the numbers on those pages didn't just reveal irresponsibility, they exposed a secret that would shatter Derek's last offense and force Mara to face the truth she'd been avoiding for years. Mara's fingers trembled as she unfolded the first document. Her eyes darted across the page, hesitating at the lines that held more truth than she'd ever been given in her own home. Derek leaned forward, trying to peek over her shoulder, but Samuel lifted a hand calmly, an unspoken command that froze him in place. "Let her read," I said softly. The room seemed to contract around us, air tightening as Mara's eyes widened. Page after page revealed the truth Derek had buried under bluster, excuses, and the false confidence of a man who believed that noise could hide numbers. Loan defaults, margin calls, investments not just gone, but reversed into debt. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. What is this?" she whispered. Derek lunged toward the document, snatching one of the pages. "This means nothing. Markets fluctuate. Anyone who knows investing understands that." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "It's not fluctuating when it reaches zero or below." "It was temporary," Derek shot back. "I would have turned it around if she," he jabbed a finger at me, "hadn't cut off the money." I almost laughed, not cruelly, just incredulously. Money you were never entitled to. Money meant to support the house you lived in, not to gamble on fantasies. Mara stared at the second page, broker statements with red ink dominating the numbers like warning sirens. She looked up at Derek slowly, as though seeing him through a new lens. "You said we had savings," she said quietly, "that we were building toward a condo. You looked me in the face and said that." "I said we were investing," he snapped. "I didn't hide anything." "You hid everything," she whispered, her voice cracking, "and you let my mother pay for it." His jaw tensed. "She offered—" "I never offered to fund your losses," I cut in calmly. "I simply allowed my kindness to go unprotected." Mara blinked, a tear finally escaping the corner of her eye. But it wasn't the soft, helpless kind. It was the kind born from clarity, from the moment a woman realizes the life she thought she'd built was assembled on someone else's crumbling floor. "I can explain," Derek insisted, reaching for her arm. She pulled away. He wasn't prepared for that, not even a little. "Look, I just need one more investment cycle, one more chance. I can fix this. I can fix everything." "That's the same promise you made 2 years ago, and last year, and last month." His lips pressed together, but before he could respond, Samuel stepped in. "Let's move to the terms," he said firmly. "All attempts at negotiation are closed." Derek looked from Samuel to me to Mara, realizing he was surrounded by people who no longer feared his anger. For the first time, his confidence cracked. 30 days, he continued, no exceptions. After that, legal consequences proceed automatically. Mara stared at the table, breathing shakily. It was the sound of a woman waking up. But just when Mara began to see the truth, Derek, cornered and unraveling, would throw out a last desperate accusation that none of us expected, and it would change the entire direction of the conversation. Cornered animals don't surrender. They lash out. Derek was no different. The moment he sensed the ground beneath him crumbling, his posture snapped from defensive to vindictive, like a man grabbing for any weapon left within reach. He pointed directly at me. "This is her fault," he barked. "She's been trying to break our marriage for years. She's jealous. Jealous because she's old and alone and hates that Mara chose me." Mara flinched. Samuel didn't. I simply looked at him, really looked at the shaking hands, the wild eyes, the brittle confidence. He was a man built of hollow victories and loud declarations, now faced with the quiet durability of facts. "Derek," I said calmly, "I don't need to break your marriage. You've been doing that without help." His nostrils flared. "You think you're better than us because you have a house, because you have some savings?" "No," I replied. "I think I'm better than the version of myself who let you treat me like furniture." Samuel tapped the document with his pen. "Let's keep this focused on the matter at hand." But Derek wasn't focused. He was unraveling. "You want the truth?" he said, voice rising. "You kicked us out because you can't stand not being the center of attention. Everything has to be about you. You want to feel powerful? Fine, you're powerful. Happy now?" "Power," I said, folding my hands, "isn't shouting. It's choices, and I'm finally making mine." Mara looked between us, her eyes filling with something new, not fear, not confusion, recognition. Derek swiveled toward Mara. "Tell her, Mara. Tell her how she's been poisoning you against me. Tell her how she manipulates you. This whole thing, this mess, is because she can't stand me." Mara swallowed hard, her breath unsteady. I don't think that's true," she whispered. His face contorted. "Excuse me?" She wiped a trembling hand over her cheek. "She didn't hide anything. She didn't lie about money. She didn't yell at me. She didn't tell me to ignore bills or pretend we were saving when we weren't." "Mara," he warned. She shook her head. You told me everything was under control, but the papers say otherwise. Derek's voice cracked with desperation. I did it for us, to build a future, to make something of our lives. By gambling my mother's money? She asked softly. By yelling at her in her own home? He stuttered, trying to find a foothold, any foothold. Then he found the ugliest one. You want to know why she's doing this? It's because she doesn't want you to have anything. She wants you dependent, weak. She's jealous of our marriage. That's what this is, jealousy. Silence settled thickly. Then Mara did something I didn't expect, not so soon, not so clearly. She sat up straighter. No, she said firmly, I think she finally stopped letting us take advantage of her. Derek blinked, stunned. Samuel closed the folder with finality. We're done here. Derek stood abruptly, chair screeching against the floor. His breath came in sharp bursts. This isn't over, he hissed. You'll regret this. I looked him in the eye. I stopped regretting things the moment I stopped accepting disrespect. But as Derek stormed out of the room, it wasn't his anger that stayed with me. It was the look on Mara's face and the decision she was about to make that neither of us could have predicted. The door slammed behind Derek with a sharp echo that lingered longer than his words ever had. The room felt suddenly lighter, as though something toxic had finally been vented out. Samuel gathered his papers in neat stacks, his movements calm, controlled, professional closure. Mara didn't move. She sat frozen at the table, staring at a spot just beyond her folded hands. Her shoulders rose and fell unevenly, breath catching like she was afraid the truth might disappear if she exhaled too hard. Take your time, Samuel said gently. There's no rush now. He stepped out, giving us privacy without asking. That gesture alone told me he understood this moment wasn't legal anymore. It was human. I waited. Silence can be a gift if you don't rush to fill it. Finally, Mara spoke. He says if he leaves, he'll file for divorce. I nodded once. That's his choice. Her voice cracked. He told me if he can't live in your house, he doesn't want to be married. The words settled between us like a stone dropped into water, heavy, unavoidable. I leaned forward slightly. Then he didn't want a marriage. He wanted shelter and funding. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. I didn't rush to touch her. Sometimes comfort comes from being allowed to feel the full weight of something. She whispered, I feel stupid. All this time I thought I was protecting peace. You were protecting noise, I said softly. Peace doesn't require you to disappear. She looked up at me, eyes red but clearer. When you turned off the internet, when the card stopped working, it was awful, but it was the first time I could hear my own thoughts. I nodded. Silence does that. She took a deep breath. I didn't get in his car. I paused. When? Just now, in the parking lot. He was screaming, hitting the steering wheel, telling me to get in. I walked away. Something inside my chest loosened. Good, I said. That was brave. She swallowed. I'm staying with a friend tonight, just one night. One night is enough to think clearly, I replied. She hesitated, then asked quietly, Did you ever feel afraid of being alone? I answered honestly. Yes, until I realized being alone is better than being erased. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. I think I understand now. We stood together, not embracing, not separating, just standing as two adults who had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. At the door, she turned back. Mama, thank you for saying no. I watched her walk away, shoulders still tense but no longer folded inward. When I stepped outside, the sunlight felt warmer. The city moved on around me, unaware of the quiet earthquake that had just reshaped my life. I exhaled slowly. The hardest part was over, or so I thought, because the next 30 days would test every boundary I had set, and Derek wasn't done trying to reclaim power he no longer possessed. The days that followed settled into a strange, unfamiliar rhythm, quiet but charged. The 30-day notice hung over everything like an invisible clock, ticking not loudly but relentlessly. I returned to the hotel each evening with a sense of detachment, as if my life were unfolding a few steps ahead of me, and I was finally watching it with clear eyes. Derek tried, of course. The messages started politely enough. "Can we talk like adults? Let's not involve lawyers. This doesn't have to be ugly." I didn't reply. When politeness failed, frustration took over. "You're ruining Mara's life. She'll never forgive you. You think you've won, but you're alone." Still, I didn't reply. Silence, I had learned, was not passive. It was deliberate. It was the absence of permission. Samuel kept me informed. Derek's employer had issued a formal reprimand after he sent emotionally charged emails during work hours. His attempts to paint himself as a victim had backfired. Institutions, like paper, prefer calm consistency. I spent my days simply living. I took long walks by the river. I ate meals without checking my phone. I bought groceries only for myself, small, deliberate portions, nothing wasted, nothing rushed. Each act felt ceremonial, like reclaiming a language I'd forgotten how to speak. Midway through the second week, Mara called. "I rented a studio," she said, voice tentative but proud. "It's small, the ceiling is low, but it's mine." "That's enough," I replied. "I also changed my bank accounts," she added. "No shared cards, no automatic transfers." I smiled. "Good." There was a pause. "He says I'm betraying him." "Then he understands consequences," I said evenly. On day 18, Samuel forwarded me another update. Derek's lawyers had attempted to delay the process with vague claims of emotional distress. The court rejected them. Paper remained undefeated. The closer we moved toward day 30, the quieter Derek became. Loud men often mistake silence for weakness until they realize silence has already moved past them. I started preparing the house, not emotionally, but practically. I made a list: gloves, cleaning supplies, fresh paint, open windows, reset. I didn't plan to be there on move-out day. I didn't need the spectacle. Closure doesn't require witnesses. On the evening of day 29, I laid my keys on the nightstand in the hotel room. I turned them slowly in my palm, feeling their familiar weight. Tomorrow, the house would be empty, not abandoned, available. I slept deeply that night, untouched by dreams or doubt. But the morning of day 30 wouldn't arrive quietly, and what happened at the gates would determine whether the ending was peaceful or one final confrontation. I woke on day 30 without an alarm. The light through the curtains was even and pale, like a blank page waiting for a signature. I dressed simply, ate a quiet breakfast, and turned my phone face down on the table. Today wasn't about watching. It was about allowing things to end. I wasn't going home yet. Instead, I drove out of the city to a small spa on the edge of town. Steam, warm stone, herbal tea. I let my body soften while my mind stayed clear. There was no guilt in my rest. I had earned it by standing still when chaos demanded I chase it. At 8:17 a.m., my phone vibrated. "Samuel, they've arrived. Moving truck is at the gate. Jordan is there, proceeding as planned." I exhaled slowly and slipped the phone back into my bag. At 9:03, another vibration. "Samuel, Derek is loud but compliant. Inventory underway." No surprise there. Loud men save their loudest moments for the end, hoping volume might reverse time. I sipped my tea and stared at the ceiling, thinking only of small things: opening windows, warm water on floors, the smell of clean wood. Order is built from ordinary actions. At 10:41 a.m., the final message arrived. Samuel. Keys returned. Inventory complete. Locks intact. They're gone. Gone. Not banished, not destroyed, just finished. I stayed seated for a moment, waiting for something dramatic. Anger, triumph, grief. None came. What I felt instead was factual, solid, almost boring. Completion. On the drive back, I stopped at a hardware store. Gloves, rags, floor cleaner, a new mop, practical tools for a practical ending. Then one more stop, a paint shop. Peach, I told the clerk. Warm, not loud. He smiled. Good choice. When I reached the house, I unlocked the gate slowly. The key turned easily, as if the house recognized my hand. Inside, the air was stale and heavy, marked with impressions where furniture had stood too long. I opened every window. A breeze swept through, carrying dust and old arguments out into the yard. I worked methodically. Shelves, corners, baseboards. I scrubbed the rug until the water ran clear. I patched holes in the walls where someone else's life had been mounted without permission. By evening, the house smelled clean, honest. I boiled water, made tea, and sat in the living room. No television, no shouting, just space. I rested my palm on the arm of the old green chair. It felt like greeting an old friend. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. But just when I thought the chapter had closed, a quiet knock at the door would remind me that endings often become beginnings for someone else, too. The knock came softly, almost hesitant. Not the sharp, demanding knock of someone who believed the door owed them an answer, but the careful rhythm of a guest. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, Mara stood on the porch with her hands clasped in front of her, shoulders squared in a way I had never seen before. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't bracing for impact. "Can I come in?" she asked. "As a guest," I said gently. "Yes." She nodded, stepping inside with measured respect, waiting for me to close the door before moving farther. Her eyes moved slowly around the living room, the open space, the patched walls, the clean air. "It feels different," she said quietly. "It's honest now," I replied. We sat at the table with 2 mugs of tea between us. The kettle clicked softly as it cooled. There was no rush to fill the silence. We had both learned the value of letting moments breathe. "I signed the papers today," she said finally. "I filed for divorce." I nodded once. "That's a hard step." "It is," she admitted, "but it's clear. He kept saying you broke the family, and I realized something." She looked up at me. "You didn't break anything. You stopped holding it up by yourself." Her words landed gently, but they stayed. "I rented a small place," she continued. "I pay for it myself. I work full-time now. It's exhausting," she smiled faintly, "but it's mine." That's adulthood. Tiring, honest, worth it. She hesitated, then added, "I don't want keys. I don't want to stay over. I just want to visit sometimes. Tea, conversation." Relief washed over me, not because she'd asked carefully, but because she understood. "The door is open for guests," I said, "not for dependents." She smiled fully for the first time. We drank our tea. Outside, the garden rustled softly, leaves brushing against one another like a private agreement. The house felt settled, not quiet from fear, but quiet from balance. Before she left, she paused at the door. "Thank you," she said, "for saying no. I didn't know how much I needed someone to." I watched her walk down the path, her steps steady, her back straight. She didn't look back. That night, I sat alone in the living room and turned on the TV. The music channel filled the space with violin notes, clear, unhurried. I adjusted the volume exactly where I wanted it. No one reached for the remote. The house breathed around me, steady and warm. But peace has a way of attracting attention, and soon my doorbell would ring again, not with conflict, but with women who needed to learn the power of saying no. The doorbell rang the following Wednesday at exactly 4 o'clock. I smiled at the precision. Fear is chaotic, but resolve keeps time. I had already set the table, cups neatly arranged, a teapot steaming gently, pens and blank paper laid out beside a thin folder of documents. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint and baked apples. Not a performance, just order. Zoe arrived first, brisk and observant, scanning the room with approval. Behind her came Olga, then Betty, small, hunched, her eyes rimmed red, as if she'd been crying for days. "He wants me to sign the house over to him," Betty said before she'd even fully crossed the threshold. "Says it's an investment, says he'll buy me something better later. I'm scared to refuse. He gets angry." "Sit," I said gently, pouring tea. "We'll go slowly." They settled around the table, shoulders tense, hands wrapped tightly around warm cups. I recognized that posture. I had lived in it for years. "Let's start with something simple," I said. "Gifting property is permanent. Once it's gone, it's gone. Love does not require urgency. If anyone rushes you, the answer is automatically no." Betty swallowed. "But he says it's for my own good." "So did my son-in-law," I replied calmly. "It wasn't." Zoe nodded. "And never give passwords. Not to phones, not to banks, not to helpful relatives." "Exactly," I said. I slid a sheet of paper toward Betty. "Here's a sentence you can use. Memorize it if you need to. I'm not ready to change ownership. I need time." Repeated word for word. Don't explain, don't justify. Olga leaned forward. "What if he yells?" "Then you leave the room," I answered. "No document is signed under raised voices." We talked for over an hour about wills instead of transfers, separate accounts, receipts, limited powers of attorney with expiration dates, about how letting someone stay temporarily can quietly become years if boundaries aren't named. By the time Betty stood to leave, she looked different, straighter, lighter. "I feel clearer," she said, "like I'm allowed to think." "You always were," I replied. "You just needed permission from yourself." After they left, I washed the cups and opened the windows. The house felt purposeful, like it had found a new role. That evening, Mara stopped by briefly. She knocked, waited. "Tea still warm?" she asked. "For guests," I said, smiling. She sat, holding the mug with both hands. "I had my first full paycheck," she said. "No shared accounts, no explanations." I nodded. That's how it starts. When she left, the house settled again, quiet but alive. I sat at my desk and opened a clean notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Wednesday, 4 p.m., boundaries and paperwork." It felt right. And as I closed the notebook, I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was becoming a map for anyone still afraid to reclaim their own home. The house was quiet in the way only an owned space can be. Not empty, not tense, but settled. I moved through the room slowly that evening, not because I was tired, but because there was no longer any reason to rush. The walls held warmth now, not echoes. I straightened the framed riverfront print, hanging it slightly lower than before, exactly where it felt right to me. I adjusted the lamp beside the green armchair, smoothing the fabric with my palm. Small things, final things. On the coffee table lay my notebook. I opened it and reread the first lines I had written weeks earlier, when fear still disguised itself as responsibility. I turned to a clean page and wrote without hesitation, "Ownership is not just deeds and keys. It is the right to choose silence, the right to say no, the right to sit in your own living room without shrinking." I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer. The phone buzzed once. A message from Mara. Made dinner in my apartment. Burned the rice. Ate it anyway. Still proud. I smiled. A life doesn't rebuild itself with grand gestures. It rebuilds itself with imperfect meals, paid bills, and quiet evenings where no one raises their voice. I turned on the television and found the music channel. A violin filled the room, clear and steady. I raised the volume by one small notch, exactly where I liked it. No footsteps followed. No one reached for the remote. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and listened. Not just to the music, but to the house itself. The soft creak of wood settling, the distant hum of plumbing, the calm rhythm of a place no longer rented out to other people's moods. Outside, the garden rustled. Somewhere a branch tapped gently against the window. Ordinary sounds. Honest sounds. Earlier in my life, I had believed that being kind meant enduring, that love meant sacrifice without limit, that keeping peace required silence. I know better now. Peace is built, boundaries are maintained, and love, real love, does not demand that you disappear. I reached for the remote and turned the volume down slightly, then up again, just to remind myself that I could. Enough, I said aloud. The words settled into the room like a final seal. Tomorrow the kettle would boil, Wednesday would come, questions would be asked, papers would be read, lives would continue, louder for some, quieter for others. As for me, I sat in my chair, in my house, in my life. And for the first time in years, I wasn't surviving someone else's story. I was finally living my own.